So welcome, everybody. We're doing a series on the lectures on images, and number 39 is the second one called Image Finding. And so does anybody want to share, an initial impression or just check in and bring anything to our meeting here before we start reading into the lecture?
I could share a little bit. There was something in the Q&A that kind of slapped me in the face. And the guide says, an unhappy person cannot make anyone happy. The first thing that comes to mind is, how is that? Well, first thing that comes to mind is it really my responsibility to make somebody else happy? And the second thing that comes from my experiences, my girlfriend is like, says that I make her happy all the time, and I'm not a happy person, So anyways, I just kind of,
Curious. Yeah. Okay. I can give a stab at that in some ways because I think in part you're saying the key, like if you, felt like you needed to make her happy and she needed you to make her happy, and you were coming out of that unhappy place. It's vibrational, right? But it's also, the way that we harmonize with each other and when we're in our hearts, right? Like people can be the way they are and we can still feel our connectedness and our love, and we don't have to control them, and they make us happy. It's nice to be with people. It's like it's a pleasure to be with each other even when we're not in perfection, right? We're not our God selves yet. Yeah. So that partly speaks, I think, to the spiritual maturity of your partner and maybe the relationship, right? In that you don't really feel like that's your job either. And so I think people that feel, oh, they have to make everybody happy is also where it can get. Does that
well,
help?
I think we're in truth with each other, and
Yeah.
that is probably what's making her happy, because previous relationships were not,
Right.
of that ilk, so to speak.
Right.
And there was a lecture not too long ago. Who was it that was doing the lecture? Oh, it was another teacher. I think I joined a Vermont lecture study, and
Uh-huh.
the lecture was on love, and it occurred to me during that lecture study that even when you can't be that person who is like unconditionally compassionate, with everyone, if you can be in your truth, it's sort of like the same thing as bringing love to the equation. God is love, God is truth, truth is love.
I agree, and 100%. It's like, and you can deliver quote unquote truth, with not love, but then I don't think that it becomes the true truth, right? It's like they are a pair that are unified together, and one without the other doesn't become whole. Love with is, not a good space, and truth without love is not a good space. They need to be united, and sometimes just being in truth is an act of love, right? To
Right.
offer that. So yeah, great. Hi, Jasmine, welcome.
Everyone.
Hello, Jasmine.
I guess Jacob dropped out. Will be joining us again here in a minute, but let's go ahead and begin the lecture a little bit. this is one of the lectures that I don't think is quite as clear and concise as some, but I think he has some important points in here that hopefully we can distill a bit. Yeah. So this was a lecture that came out November 7th, 1958. And last time we, discussed the first lecture on images. And so you can look at that, if people didn't get that. And I don't know if he kind of defines it in the beginning of this, so it might be useful. Basically, he's talking a little bit about how, when we have experiences, particularly in childhood, where we don't have a lot of context, and we're maybe they're painful or traumatizing in some way, that it's a natural part of the process to try to predict and prevent it in the future, right? And so we try to draw conclusions about our experiences, make stories out of them that give us a kind of power over them, because they're like a generalization. And this is what we have to pay attention to, look out for, um, and so all of these things, in many ways, the guide calls images. And we have self-images, and we have images about life, and we have images about men and about women, often connected to our early experience with our parents. And we have images about relationship, also, related there, sometimes with siblings. We have with school peer, relationships. We have images about work. Everything in life, tends to get kind of mentally encapsulated in these shorthand understandings, so that we can hopefully control and be safe in life. So in some sense, it's part of our defense system and in our labeling system, right? So that we can know what it is, and we can then know what to do with it. And I think in some of the future lectures, he goes more into sort of the aspects of the image where there's the belief of what, is, and then the image is also consists of what we believe, given that we have to do to keep ourselves safe. So it becomes a complex that then becomes creative in our lives, right? We're looking through the lens of that, and we will see it, and we will provoke it, and we will, magnetically attract it, on all kinds of levels. So it's literally a way that we are creating our reality. And often where we do see, patterns and dynamics that keep repeating, it's evidence that there's probably an image there. But so in this lecture, he's talking a little bit more about how to find an image, and then what, how to work with it a little bit, how to go beyond the superficiality of, like, what we think we know, and go deeper into the self-exploration and self-observation to understand what's really living inside of us. So we have to become conscious of these often unconscious or semi-conscious beliefs that are controlling us. So he begins, "Greetings in the name of the Lord. I bring you blessings, my dear friends. Blessed is this hour. The material world constantly presents you with obstacles that prevent you from seeing the world as it really is. These obstacles include time, space, and motion. Time, space, and motion are completely different in the spiritual world than in your world of manifestation." And, this is a kind of a part of the lecture where he kind of goes into like a larger, perspective of the cosmic and larger aspects of things. So, as he's talking here about, these understandings of time and measurement, and how, nuclear physicists also, are looking into these things, it's like he's really boiling it down to this, like we're always learning, we're going deeper. And he's saying, I've talked to you a great deal about the necessity of exploring your soul. So it's like, this is kind of the cosmonauts going into the inner space, right? And particularly in the last lecture, I discussed the inner images, the wrong impressions and conclusions that a human being forms over the course of several lifetimes. And we often are thinking of like even things like time and space and the physical manifestation as possibly forms, right, spiritual forms, that are also based on collective images and things like that. But here he's bringing us back and speaking about the importance of working with our personal images and learning how to find them. And he says, this is the way that we'll be able to understand ourselves and also understand our story, everything that has happened and will continue to happen until you dissolve the images. So as in outer space, so in your own development, only by going down can you go up. Only by exploring the depths, the deepest regions of your unconscious mind, can you develop spiritually and ascend in the true sense. Temporarily, it might seem that, you're regressing or, getting worse or, going into, darkness. And he says depressions are almost unavoidable temporarily in the search for what and who you really are. But my friends, think of the analogy between space exploration and self-exploration, and you will soon be confirmed by human science. You have to descend into your unconscious in order to reach the liberation and clarity of absolute truth, as far as you are able to perceive it while still in the body. So, part of it is like, we already know things about ourselves, right? But that's what we know consciously. And the mystery, the new things, the things that we seek to discover because they may be, unconsciously influencing our experiences, they're in this unconscious realm. So in order to have more wisdom, more self-knowledge, more awareness, we have to seek to go into the unconscious. And he doesn't say this directly in this lecture, but there really is a way in which, for the most part, the unconscious is in the body, right? And so this is where in our Western culture, we have trouble accessing and working in these realms because we have trouble, like, again, our protection has been to avoid feelings in our body and living in our mental spaces and in our theoretical and conceptual worlds and our images, like instead of what is, what we want it to be, how we think we should be, how we think it should be. So, we're working, in this kind of place that is the projection of a certain level of our being. And if we sink deeper, into the body and into the feelings, we will begin to understand more about the experiences and the results. And also, like sometimes we begin to realize these things wear us out, or they make us anxious, or they don't seem to be, the answers, even though we keep trying, we can never get there, so there's kind of ways that over time, as we've tried to use these pseudo solutions to life's difficulties and they don't really work, we begin to question more deeply as well and seek a little underneath the obvious. And, we've been there, done that, and it's not working. So he says he promises that tonight he would continue the discussion of image finding. And he says we can gain a little more understanding of the pathwork principles through this. The glimpses may eventually open the door for the active personal search, so necessary for complete purification. to voluntarily step across the threshold from the darkness into the light. So he says, I beg any of you who have not started yet, but is willing to ask, one of the people he's talking to, the group of people he's speaking to, work with each other, to work with somebody as a helper, because he really is suggesting it's not easily done alone. And so it helps, and guidance can come as to who we work with and stuff like that. So, in general, that's something that people, have either done, they've worked with other people individually, or, it's something that you can consider. But basically, I guess he's continues in the lecture. Now, my dear friends, before you start searching for your images, you need to know several important facts. The first is that you do not approach your unconscious with a moralizing attitude. So I kind of have that highlighted, and I found that it's really subtle sometimes how we get into moralizing attitudes, but I have also found that it is not useful at all to approach the unconscious from that place. So in some sense, the first step is to look for, and in some ways the moralizing attitude is also connected with our images, because it's often connected with our idealized self-image, how we think we should be, right, in order to get what we want. And so, there's this way that when we fall short of how we think we should show up or whatever, or when we notice that we're in violation of spiritual law, or we fall short of our mark, then we can judge ourselves and put ourselves down and make ourselves wrong. And this, completely creates a split inside of us, in which we're in, kind of a stuck place of, rebellion against, and, a forcing current towards, like doing it in this way, and it doesn't work. It doesn't get anywhere. I think many people have had some experience with this, and we can, learn more about that later on in some other lectures when we get more into, idealized self-image and stuff. But I highlighted that because I think it's really, really important to begin to be conscious of when you are moralizing with yourself, right? So does everybody understand what that means? Any questions or comments as well? Do you know when you're moralizing with yourself?
Hi, Darlene. I have a question. Well, for me personally, the way I judge right from wrong, or what to do, what not to do, is to moralize. So what else? What other lens are we looking at, right?
Good question. How do you know what's right from wrong if you're not moralizing? Well, I think we do know, right? It's like, but it's kind of what we do with that understanding and that knowledge. So let's say your conscience, your inner, truth-o-meter tells you that somehow, your truth and love-o-meter, that you missed the mark. You quote unquote sinned, right? You didn't hold it. And so there's a part of you that, can make a discernment, right? That you've fallen short, but this is the falling short of the living from the heart of our own higher self, right? And not the falling short of the, mask that says, what's gonna, make you look good, or make, other people think you're cool, or, make you above everybody else because, everybody's, like you have the, stuff that everybody's looking for. It's kind of like the idealized self-image defeats its real purpose of connection. It's a separating influence, because it says like, oh, in order to be okay, I have to be, better than in some way. I have to, be superior. and then you judge and reject your inferior parts, and that doesn't help them grow when we judge and reject them. And so that's the other piece of this, is with the moralizing attitude, right, you're just grinding these imperfect parts of you into the dust, and you brought them in with you in order to heal them and help them develop and grow. So rejecting them and grinding them down and, making them wrong is not a way that they can learn or that they can evolve. It only cripples them and is usually a continuation of the wounding, that we got from our parents. And in some ways that's a sacred wound, but our work is to, stop wounding ourselves and start healing ourselves. And so it's often felt like, well, if I don't, if I don't crack the whip, if I don't make myself, if I don't tell myself how I should be, I will be bad, or I won't want to learn. But the truth is, all of the goodness is already in us, right? Our higher self is already, our essence is already there. And, it needs freedom to develop. Everything that we're doing is like, we're immature, right? So we have to grow. And by denying and judging and making it wrong, we are not able to grow. Growth needs encouragement, growth needs correction, maybe, but from a gentle, loving place that tries to support the change, not rebuke and reject the being that is trying, right, or made the mistake. So, it's kind of like our attitude towards ourself, in this way, and the moralizing. I mean, continue to just feel inside of yourself when you do it. It's not, I'm not saying just cut it off. You can't, so now your job is to make a study of this. Okay, so what happens inside of me? And let me really go in and feel the vibration and the energy and the experience when I am, in this moralizing place with myself, so that I can know directly the fruits of it. And Jesus said, by their fruits shall you know them, right? So if we can feel the true consequences of what this does, when our mind thinks, oh, this is how we need to keep ourselves on the straight and narrow and do the right thing, but it doesn't really work that way. So we have to learn that deep in our own being. Does that help?
Sort of. Sort of it helps, because I think that for me personally anyways, it goes against our current world. So it's hard. I guess it's a new learning. It's a completely new teaching, and I don't think I know how to do it.
Yeah, I mean, no, but I mean, it is, even for us, that it's not a new teaching. It's like learning how to do this is huge, right? It's like, it's really the reversal of our conditioning, of our whole culture, like you said, and the level of consciousness that culture lives in. This is the, the voice of the ego, the defense, the lower self consciousness. So we are learning about it, and it won't go away overnight. And it's good what you're saying. It's like, but just keep exploring. And so he kind of goes on with some sort of similarly saying, what I was saying, the reason why, is really the unconscious doesn't like it and will resist, right? So if we're trying to work with our unconscious, if we're trying to transform our unconscious, if we're trying to work with these parts of ourselves that are somehow traumatized or somehow, ignorant or lost in suffering somewhere, like we need to approach them, as their support, as their, somebody reaching out, offering a hand, befriending. And so the moralizing attitude, the judgment, right, is is what it's cringing against, because that's all it's ever experienced, right? And how can it blossom into its fullness if all that it's ever getting is rejection? So, maybe there are things there that need to be looked at, but that's what he's saying, like we have to go below this level of the superficial and of the cultural and of the known, and drop deeper inside here to discover what's really going on. So go ahead. Yeah. Frank.
Yeah. What comes to my awareness also is that when we're doing this kind of work, we're really like, we're pulling our wounded child out from underneath a rock. And the last thing we want to do is shake our hand at him and go, that's not the way you're supposed to do it. So that's a big part of the work. Your adult self has to be gentle with your wounded child, especially when you're trying to do process work around this subject, when you're trying to uncover the real wounding that caused the image, and understand how much emotional pain it's bringing to your life on a subconscious level, day in and day out. That's kind of what comes to mind.
Beautiful. Well said. Exactly. Yeah. So he's saying, that our unconscious resist it, it'll fight against you and make it all the harder for your willing consciousness to come to terms with it. So, then we get frustrated because it's fighting against us, and then we want to, like make it, go into the forcing current even more, and that just tightens the noose. So in your development so far, it says you've realized the importance of purification and self-knowledge, and you have all started to think about your mistakes, your shortcomings, and your weaknesses. The same holds true on all levels of your being. When I say all levels of your being, I mean that there are several layers, not merely a conscious and unconscious layer. In fact, several degrees of consciousness and being exist about every conceivable attitude, about your faults and weaknesses, as well as about your qualities and strengths. In the last analysis, the wrong inner impression exists as a rigid form that controls the events in your life. It also consists then of the faults that you may consciously know quite well, but you may not realize that these same weaknesses exist on another level. And if you approach the search with the attitude of self-moralizing, you'll have difficulties. So this is where, like it's part of what I think he's going into later, and I've discovered this too, like to seek this other level, there's another understanding, there's another place where this thing was formed, where it is in its truth, doing the best it knows how, and when we can go to that level and really meet it there and understand it, then we can help it. And it immediately opens our heart towards it, because we're like, oh, of course, that there's an understanding that has a very loving, like a way again of connecting us to ourselves in a healthy and healing way. So, so this is this different approach that, he's advising. And so he says, the best way to begin is by thinking about your hurts, conflicts, and problems. Regard your wrong inner attitudes as ignorance and error. That is what all faults really are. Think about your idiosyncrasies, your prejudices, your tight emotions in certain domains of life. Think how you react emotionally to certain things, and when and how these reactions repeat themselves throughout your life. Review the disappointments that apparently have nothing to do with your actions and reactions. Afterward, when you recognize a pattern, you will be able to see the connection with an inner attitude that may so far have escaped your consciousness. Only after you have gained some understanding of your inner reactions and their bearing on outer events will you see that these reactions are nothing less than a fault or several faults that exist on a deeper level, quite apart from your outer personality. I think later on, maybe this next section, even talks about, like we don't even recognize some of the faults that are deeper inside, and that we don't even necessarily act them out, but then we can discover them and discover that we have like inner splits in us. And one part is, we might judge in another person, but we actually discover that it's, within us as well, So he says, once you realize that your inner reactions come from a faulty attitude, there are two possibilities. Each represents an obstacle best removed by awareness. That's different than judgment, right? And this is the kind of the secret and the trick is, like for most of us in the egoic consciousness, immediately following on the heels of awareness, like, just instantaneously comes the, judgment. Is a good, bad, right, wrong, okay, not okay, right? So we're learning to kind of put a buffer in between, just, okay, I don't know the answers to that. I just am with it as it is, right? And we don't have to judge it. We can just be present in awareness to it. And that allows us to go into this deepening, right? So one possibility is that you find the same faults that you have already recognized on a superficial outer level. And you may even have overcome some of these faults to some degree. You will be all the more shocked to find the same trends all over again. So different layers, like an onion ring, right? And so you will either react by saying that you already knew that you had this fault, and then in the minute that you kind of, say, oh, I already know that, right? That prevents yourself from seeing at a deeper level, from realizing that you've come across something quite new. And although you're aware of its outer existence, there's something new to see there, right? Especially if, you're aware of its outer existence, but you haven't penetrated it and it hasn't changed. There's always something new to understand about it. So we have to dive deep and do this deep excavation kind of work in this path. And he says it's necessary to approach this fault as something new in spite of some sense of familiarity with its outer existence. And unless you approach it in this way, you cannot experience and relive the original feelings that led you to form the attitude in the first place. And then without re-experiencing them, you cannot gain the necessary understanding. So this is where this deep dive, where it's kind of trying to take us, is back to the original feelings that formed the image that led to, this, form that then we're keep recreating. And in order to dissolve it, in order to, free ourselves from it, we need to go in and gain this deep understanding of why we created it in the first place and where it came from. And so when you come across known reactions or faults in your inner images, beware of the attitude that you already know about them. You may know about them, but they still exist on another level, and you must approach them with as much freshness as you would as if you were encountering them for the very first time. Remember this, my friends. So this is part of what I feel like I do, is help people bring that space of newness, and remind them that, they're seeing through their old eyes, because it's new to me, right? And so it's easier for me. So it's one of the things I think helpers can do, is bring that newness and that deepening, for people into it. But we can do it ourselves, but we just have to, catch that tendency, to think that we already, but we have a name for it, we have an experience of it, yeah, I've known that, I've done that, if it's still something that is not harmonized and functioning well within your system, you need to know it deeper. So any questions or comments from here? So he's just going into another possibility, that also happens where we encounter tendencies that really seem completely contradictory to the self that we consciously know. In other words, that's very foreign to us and we've never experienced it before, and so this can also be where we're attempted to say, oh, this is not even real. It can't be so, I don't have this fault in my conscious daily life. It's not an aspect of me that comes out in most situations. But, I've often found that there are, certain situations that do bring that out, and that I have everything in me ultimately, right? We have everything in all of us.
And especially when we have an ISI that masks
Exactly.
the image.
Right. Right. So we wouldn't want to believe that we have that. So we tend to try to control it and deny it and hide it inside of us. So let us take a few examples to make this a little clearer. Consider the people who have a strong sense of responsibility in their lives. Their family and business contacts know that they are thoroughly responsible. Yet when they try to understand their lives and themselves and begin to look for their images, they may be shocked to find that in certain ways they are irresponsible. The resulting puzzlement could lead such people to reject the new findings as wrong because they contradict another part of their being. In their confusion, they might quickly cover up again what they were just about to bring out of hiding. Or let us take people who are known to have a great deal of courage. By uncovering certain emotional reactions, tendencies, and inner conditions, they come face to face with a cowardly part of their personality. This realization may come as quite a shock. People will then say to themselves, this cannot be so. They may cite a number of instances where they have proven their courage. Yet their discovery of certain cowardly emotional reactions is also valid, right? I like it's also valid. It's not saying that the person is like the evidence of these other aspects deny that they don't have courage, or whatever. So, but that we are really, always kind of elements of it all. And so it's important for us to realize that on a deeper layer of our images, you may find faults that you do not have outwardly. Outwardly, you have exactly the opposite reactions, and genuinely so, not only as a mask. So you always tend to think in terms, in either or terms, right? And this is, I think, a good, humanity has learned by now that it is wrong to say a person is good or bad. That far you have come, but the need to exclude an either or judgment also holds true for every individual tendency. So all tendencies, like when we go into that immediate good, bad, right, wrong, okay, not okay, right, like we split the world in two, and we're really missing a deeper truth, which is that each of those aspects, each side of it has both good and bad, has both right and wrong, has both, distortion and divinity are the ways that I like to put it. And so if we, do the superficial judgment, right, and don't again do the deeper work of going into the splits on both sides and actually uncovering, like the ways that they are in truth and in distortion on both sides of the, opposites of the aspects of, qualities of being and stuff. So anyway, there's all of this, way that we're learning a lot more about all of this inside of us by, not just making the assumption that it's old familiar territory. but going into a deeper exploration and excavation of what lives inside of us. So in this way, when you delve into the deeper realms of your being, you will eliminate difficulties that exist only because you ignore some facts of the life of the soul. People nowadays talk about depth psychology. Your self-search is exactly that. But in order to win the battle, you also have to learn depth prayer, depth meditation, and depth thinking, my friends. At first, your prayer or meditation is an intellectual pursuit. But when you arrive at the findings on the level of the inner self, you have to go deeper. There are rare moments when you are filled with God and the laws of truth. So I don't know, here he's talking about, like if we go into these inner spaces and dwell there, right, and really be with our feelings and be with our inner depths of being. And this we get to in prayer and meditation, that, they can open to these moments when we're filled with God, the laws of truth. And they may occur before we've discovered all of our deeper levels of consciousness. They're there actually to help. The more we have kind of access to that, the more we can go deeper into our darker areas and negativities or pain places and that kind of thing. And he says this feeling can't be forced, of the connection with the light. It can't be controlled. It is grace, my friends, but it will become more or less permanent state once you have made conscious all unconscious falsehoods and have cleansed yourself of them. So it's kind of our natural state, right? So we're just uncovering shining precious stones is one way that I've heard it put, right? That we are already the gemstone underneath, but on the surface we look like kind of an ordinary, like pitted rock or whatever, because we've not been polished and shined. So we do this work, and then who shows up is the real self, the higher self, right? So he says, what I mean by depth prayer or depth meditation or depth thinking is that you take everything you have found out about your hidden reactions, whether they concern trends you find repeatedly or whether you come across quite different reactions from your known outer ones. And you think about their effect on yourself and others. So it's kind of where we don't even notice, like when we have these reactions, how they make us feel and for how long. Like there's sometimes when I notice when I get triggered about something that I like literally it take me a day or two to clear my system again. That there's a kind of way that we get, even on a physiological level, it's a stress reaction, it's a PTSD reaction. And so we're dumping, a bunch of poisonous chemical hormones into our system that are all stress related, right? It's not good for our health. It's not good for our life force. It might be in the moment, like a flight boost, or something, but like there's a hangover from that I think we feel. And there's a hangover to certain thoughts and certain ways that we're working with ourselves, and I think depression is one of those, when we're trying to, force ourselves from our judger in our control, or, and we have a lot of inner criticism. I think it's what adds to depression. And we just, give up and say, well, it's all hopeless, right? So, we really have to, keep going deeper and work with feeling into these places as not a mental experience, but how they impact us vibrationally, energetically, in the body, in the sensations of the areas of our being. Most of you have done some of this with me, but just so you kind of are following what we're talking about here, take a minute and just go inside, and you're an energy field, right? And there's places where that energy is flowing and expanded, and places where it's contracted and stuck, and places where it's heavy and thick, and places where it's pressured, and places where you're gritting your teeth, right, to you know keep in control, or you're holding different places. So just scan your body, and feel like, are you completely relaxed? Are you completely just, feeling calm and at peace? Or what else is there? And don't judge it, just be curious again, oh, and it may not always be comfortable. You may discover places that, like it's hard to breathe, right? So what we tend to do is try to just avoid that by running up into our head and figuring it out or trying to fix it. So if we can just stay with where those places of discomfort show up for a minute, and open our hearts with them, and like again, be curious. I see you. Who are you? Why are you feeling that way, right? And we bring our conscious present awareness with curiosity and openness to learn from a whole new place what this is that we may have labeled, or we may have struggled with and worked with in 1,000 different ways, trying to fix our story or control the feelings. So any comments or questions from that? How did people, could you all feel something inside, somewhat of what I was pointing towards?
Hi, Darlene. I really appreciated that. And thanks for pointing out, our reactions. And something that I can be a witness to is sometimes for me, when I react, or I have some sort of anxiety or some PTSD type of response, I actually don't notice it immediately. It will linger for days, and I'm just like, oh my God, it's happening again. You're scared. But then there's an aha moment just right now where, for a moment, when you go inside and you're still, you can remind yourself, well, for me anyways, that it's okay. I'm not going crazy, but it's very hard. It's very hard.
And exactly, excellent, because this is what that needs. We can't prevent ourselves from getting slimed or triggered or whatever happens, but we don't have to live with it forever. So the minute that we can wake up to that happening, we can clear ourselves. And what I was leading you in was like, so the beginning steps of doing that. We have to go in and be with our energy and our physical system. But it's like you said, like once you get present there without judgment, then oftentimes the body feels like, and then the knowledge comes in, oh, it's okay, really, I can let go, I can relax. Sometimes we have to help it a little bit, but just being with ourselves in that kind of heart, compassionate presence for what the places of distress in our system are feeling, then we can help transform it. So great. Anybody else? So
Sometimes,
go ahead.
oh,
Yeah, go ahead, Jacob.
thank you. Yeah, sometimes it takes me a moment to unpause the
Yeah, that's
or
okay. Sorry.
unmute. So I often, in order for me to kind of like seek the truth, I try to be open to experiencing those words, and then to clarify for myself, I also look for exceptions to help me like understand more deeply of the difference between certain things that come up in my mind. So there was I really resonated with how you framed it as energies, and where energy is stuck, and where are we feeling that stuckness. And I've been wrestling for a while now with positive aggression, right? And just kind of what it looks like and what it feels like, and how it's it's a flow. It's like it does feel like anger or like charged energy, but it's not stuck, right? It's not destructive, right? But it can be firm, and it can be um, not cutting, but it
Yeah.
like maybe cut through
What is
manipulation
its
or BS or
purpose?
something.
What do you need this positive aggression to accomplish is one way to explore it a little bit.
Mm. And that would help me determine whether it is truly positive aggression or whether it's some kind of distorted aggression.
I think so. Yeah, like, there's a kind of like, if you feel into the intention, that, like there's something that you're trying to, activate in you or release, but, it's like what's the goal, or how do you, like, are you wanting to set a boundary for yourself? Are you wanting to control another person, right? Are you, you know, wanting to just speak your truth?
Right. Yeah. 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 Sometimes it comes from a dependency, so that wouldn't make it a positive aggression. And sometimes it's trying to reach the other person's um, understanding of me and my experience. And sometimes, and this is what I have a hard time deciphering, sometimes is it being forceful because I'm dependent and I need the other person on some level, or is it a way to say no, you're not seeing me clearly, and in a like an attempt to wake the other person up. But then if I'm not paying attention to where the other person is, then it becomes more of the dependent, forceful aspect.
Yeah. And again, I think, it's a good example of sort of like how the splits, like have to unify, right? Because in a way, it's like you need to, speak your truth or whatever, but it's like it can't, it's like the process of control, right? So, like ask for, like it's nice when other people understand and see us, right? And if we never ask them to, or we never share ourselves, or try to, have that kind of sharing and connection, um, so we need to have our positive aggression to be willing to bring ourselves out and try to meet. Um, but and sometimes we will be met and sometimes we won't, right? So this is where, like, what do you do when the person doesn't meet you,
Mhm.
right?
Right.
Because this is, like something, that if we're trying to control, then then now we're, like what the Pathwork guide is saying is, like that's where we have to let go. And so if we're feeling some kind of, deep pain or deep need for them to see us, then that's the beautiful work of the healing of a pain body, right? So the person is actually unavailable for us because we actually need to do this healing. And that person isn't who's supposed to heal us. We have to heal ourselves, right?
Hmm.
So,
Yeah.
so where it's bringing up a pain body, then you need to go in and hold and see yourself.
Right. Yeah. I'm very much picking up what you're putting down. Thank you.
So, he's saying that, like, we want to compare with our reactions and our feel, with spiritual laws, them, think from both the spiritual and practical points of view, and work with the new understanding. And also when we go into our feelings, oftentimes, and we really seek the child's, experience, right? We have a deep compassion and understanding, even though we know the child's conclusion was not true, we don't we understand how the child came by it very honestly, and we try to help the child, you know, challenge that thought form, in a loving, gentle way, not, and try to find ways to communicate with it and help it understand what we may know from our adult consciousness, now. So, and then, we need to pray to God for help and strength to change sometimes very deep unconscious reactions that, that I mean, we really have pain bodies that possess us, and they're our deep defense system that we brought in. And so even though we have a lot of consciousness around it, in hindsight or whatever, like in the moment, oftentimes, we can't necessarily control, or maybe we're so good at control, we can't actually, access, the deeper layers. So, we're, we're just keeping to explore, shifting the thinking to that deeper level, and keep looking at new knowledge, and so often I just follow in my body, and it comes to a releasing of some kind, and I discover in the releasing uh, things that I didn't know before. So, it's always an adventure and a mystery to just go in and really deepen into what's present in my field and what can be revealed. So, hi, Joyce, did you come in? I don't see you now. There she comes. So, and then he says that we don't want to leave the newly found understanding alone, because then it kind of like can just slip back. And I find that, whether, it's going to slip back into the old pattern anyway, because it's kind of like we get it and we lose it and we get it again. And it's kind of like how we build the muscle of recognizing it, of awakening to it, because that's really what we have to do, is wake up and realize, oh, here it is again, and it takes a while because we're in a kind of unconscious trance that happens in these images. They literally possess us, and we live through these lenses. So, it takes a while to dissolve these images, and so we don't want to again be moralizing or judgmental when we've even discovered and found the truth, but then we slip back into and our in our old reactions again, to just be patient with ourselves and understand that that gives us one more opportunity to examine this at this deeper level and to feel the feelings and understand what is happening within our system, so that we can uh, keep unraveling it, and becoming more conscious and recognizing it when it's like a temptation, that comes so fast and we bite the hook and we're gone, and so we have to slow all of that down. And the only way I can see to do it is kind of like that we keep repeating, so again, forgiveness, we have to accept that we can't control this process. It controls us, and we are undergoing it. And if we're simply humbly living our life, then it can be less painful than if we're trying to think like we should master this in some way, or control it, or be better than what we're doing. Hi, Joyce, welcome. I hope were you on the list? Did you get it? Or am I still leaving you off of our list? Can't unmute?
Sorry, I was muted. I didn't get it. Dick forwarded it to me, and
Okay.
I appreciate very much that you're letting me participate. Thank you.
Yeah. And if you want to send me an email, I can try to add you, but it's fine too for Dick to forward. Hi, Dick. Welcome. So we're kind of midway through, and discussing this way that he's, really asking us to explore all of this stuff at a much deeper level than the superficial way that we usually think we understand and know ourselves. And so he says the work really doesn't begin until after we have kind of a recognition. So he says, we can have theoretical knowledge and still go on right on reacting in the same old way. And it's not sufficient to find an inner understanding about our hidden trends and reactions and just leave it at that. That's when the work begins, right? Is once, and then in the meditation, in the depth, in the emotional level, we have to go in and feel and work with it. And like I said, each time it kind of arises in our life is another opportunity to hold it and become more conscious. So if we do neglect meditation, he says, we might retain what we've found, but gradually it will become more remote and a merely theoretical knowledge in your brain, while you underneath go on reacting as before. And in that case, you haven't succeeded in integrating and unifying your erring emotional reactions and wrong conclusions with your intellectual knowledge. And so, and in some ways, that's really a part of the process, like it always feels like, okay, I get it. I understand it spiritually, intellectually, but then I have to embody it. I have to bring it into every cell of my body. I have to speak to all of the, parts of my, emotional bodies that, my inner child reactions and stuff, and re-educate them as one of the ways that the guide speaks of it before. So, we're bringing the truth with love into these places every time. And that's kind of the journey that we want to do. And so in order to do that, we have to, identify with our higher self and realize that these other states, are our pain body states and are coming from our images and our defenses around them and all of the trauma that's connected. And so if we can, become curious and remember, that we're in this deep self-knowledge exploration, we can begin to unravel and, clear all of this inside. He says emotions are more habit-bound than other tendencies. Moreover, they are so elusive that in spite of your efforts, your old patterns might go right on and escape your attention. You are so used to shoving the uncomfortable knowledge into your subconscious that you cannot get rid of that habit from one day to the next. And so again, sort of the first thing we have to do is wake up, and realize that that's what's happening once again. And usually we're a little ways downstream before that happens, right? Because we just go unconscious and we're back in the pattern. So breaking the habit requires a great deal of training, concentration, and effort. New habit patterns have to be established until you recognize the signs of the hidden trends that must be made conscious. You have to develop a special sensitivity for them. And this takes time, of course. It is also possible to go to the opposite extreme, which is just as harmful as the old reaction and just as bound by your images. And this may happen either because you are unconsciously impatient and want to correct your soul tendencies in a hurry by drastic means, which of course is not feasible. Or it may happen because you are angry at yourself and act in a spirit of defiance against yourself, as well as the world at large. This reaction is just as wrong as the old established pattern. You merely use a different manner of operation. So beware of these two pitfalls, my friends. The only way to work is with the understanding you have gained quietly, patiently, steadily accepting your temporary inability to react differently, knowing that slow growth is the only possible way. Take the newly found knowledge and view it from various angles. Pray and meditate on the deeper level of this new knowledge, rather than on the outer level of which you may have worked before. Another point of equal importance I want to bring to your attention is that strangely, everything connected with these distorted inner images causes you acute shame. This is one way that we can, usually identify that there's an image active in us, is where we experience shame. He says, even when the image is about something that is not shameful, objectively speaking, there might not be any justification for the shame. You would not feel that such behavior deserves shame if you encountered it in others. Once you have the courage to bring your feelings out into the open, you will see for yourself how the sense of shame and embarrassment completely vanishes, right? Like in some ways he's saying here, the only cure for shame is exposure, right? And the courage to bring, everything out into the open. And then he says, before it is out, while we're still struggling with it, you will feel the shame very strongly. So it's one of those feelings that's like a feeling of death. It's a very painful feeling to feel. And it's one of those feelings that we have to learn to, disidentify with, right? It doesn't mean that we're shameful. It means that we have an energy vibration of shame that is possessing us right now. And it's not the truth. And it's not going to kill us. Doesn't feel great, but we can just breathe it and we can just feel it and we can call light for it and we can pray, And so there's a way that we can cleanse and heal and lift into the light. And again, like he said, once it's out in the open, the shame vanishes because it's something that only lives in the hiddenness of the fear and the dark secrets. So he says, you may have a fault that is infinitely worse than what you are ashamed about, but since you discover the fault a long time ago and have accepted it by now, you don't feel so ashamed of it anymore. And you may even be able to discuss it openly with others. So some much lesser fault or tendency that has no apparent connection with a fault or a sin causes you acute shame, however, as long as you have not come to terms with it. So let us say you discover that you were very strongly influenced and dependent on one of your parents, something that in itself is nothing to be ashamed of. Until now, you ignored how much and in what manner you were influenced and how dependent you still are on the emotions your dependency has created. So when you first come across this realization, it causes you acute embarrassment. This is a typical image reaction, my friends. And if you expect this to happen, you will make things easier for yourself. You will not be under the emotional subjective impression that you alone have such feelings. For that is what you unconsciously believe when you feel so ashamed. You have created separateness for yourself with all your inappropriate defenses. But if you realize that this feeling of isolation is common to everyone, that it is a symptom to be expected, you will be able to counteract it by not giving much heed to it. You will free yourself of the separating wall that encloses you in the darkness, loneliness, fear, guilt, and false shame. Only in this way can you evolve as a free person and hold your head high instead of being governed by your false impressions and shame. It takes only a moment of courage to go through what seems so shameful and face yourself as you are. This is the only way to discover your phantom world of fear and shame that has no reality whatever. Remember that. Thus, my dear friends, you will see that when you go inward and downward, you gain an understanding of the shadows in your soul and comprehend how they came to exist. And when you look at your erroneous emotional conclusions, you will discover that fighting your imagined shames and resistances with the tools of patience, sound endeavor, and willpower is in truth the only way to ascend in spirit. Thinking you can avoid this apparent descent and yet attain spiritual growth is utterly unrealistic. It is self-deception and wishful thinking. So we cannot avoid these inner parts of our being that are trapped in these painful images. We came here to set them free. So any questions on that before we dive into a few Q&A pieces of the lecture?
Darlene, what we were talking about before you started the meeting, there is a scene that
Great.
that
Yeah. If you've got
pretty
it.
much highlights every topic that we touched on so far tonight.
Okay.
Do you want to read it?
Yeah.
Okay, it's can you bring it up? It would be
Oh, okay. Let's see. I think I can let you share. So let me see if I can share.
I have to go into my files.
Okay. I'm going to take us out of the screen share then here. And let me see if I need to give you co-host. Okay. So now see if you can, I should have made you co-host, see if you can go in and share your screen.
Okay, so let's see.
You figure it out? It should say screen share somewhere.
Hang on a second.
Mine's at the bottom of my thing, and it's a
Okay.
little green thing with an arrow. That says
Yes, share screen. Okay, so now I'm gonna click on that, and then I pick
yeah, pick the window.
what I have open. Okay, here it is, and share. Okay, what do you see?
Okay, well, I see it. It says episode 1, scene 3, first group meeting.
Yes. Can everyone see that?
So you want to introduce what this is a little?
Okay, so I wrote a screenplay, and it's called Images, and it's all about what we're studying right now. And this is the first group meeting. These are people who have found their way to this Pathwork helper and his assistant, and they found their way through various circumstances in their lives, and they're now about to begin their very first process work. None of them have ever done process work before, and they're going to discover their images. So this particular scene highlights the piece of process work that the first person, her name is Amy, does. And by the way, the people are fictitious and the scenes are fictitious, so no one's privacy is being violated. So I thought maybe, and this gives like a human expression of the concepts that the guide talks about in the lecture. So should I just read it?
Sure. I mean, I think at this point, that's probably the best.
Okay.
At some point, I think we need to produce the play or do a reading, with parts and stuff, but yeah.
Okay. So episode 1, scene 3, first group meeting. The first class meeting, the scene takes place in Paul's living room. There are chairs set in a semicircle with a low small table in the center, set as an altar with some items symbolic of a spiritual journey. There is also a large board with all the major core images written on it, but it is covered. The characters are Paul and his helper, Sarah, Matthew, Dan, Kate, and Amy. Natalie has not showed up yet. Everyone is sitting and talking a bit of small talk and introducing themselves. Paul looks at his watch, walks over to the window and looks out, then comes back and signals everyone to gather, standing in a circle around the altar, holding hands for attunement. Natalie knocks on the door just as they hold hands. Sarah breaks from the circle to open the door for her and welcomes her in. She motions for her to join the circle quickly. Natalie fumbles with her backpack and looking a bit scared, joins the circle for the attunement. Paul begins to speak. I'd like everyone to take 3 deep breaths together, and at the end of the 3rd breath, simply say your name. They slowly take 3 deep breaths, and then they all say their name at the same time. Paul, gratitude for this gathering of souls willing to explore the deeper meaning of their earthly existence. I would like to call in all their guardian angels and all the benevolent spirits that assist in their spiritual growth. I would also like to call in the higher self qualities of courage, love, and wisdom. I ask for guidance from my guardians, and I pray for humility. Would anyone else like to call in any particular spirits or qualities? Sarah, I would like to call in the Archangel Michael and the qualities of compassion and clarity. Matthew, I would like to call in brotherhood. Kate, I would like to call in Jesus. Dan, I would like to call in vulnerability. Amy and Natalie do not speak, and after a short moment of silence, Paul says, "Aho," and the circle breaks and everyone takes a seat. Paul walks over to the board and slowly removes the sheet that covers it. He comes back to the group and sits down. The large board reads, "I am not enough. I am unlovable. I am bad. I am unworthy. I don't matter. I am a victim. I am irrevocably damaged. I don't belong. I am alone. I am helpless. I am a failure. I am not whole." Paul, I'd like to thank you all for coming. The work we're about to begin will not be easy. The journey of self-exploration and transformation is a hero's journey through one's darkness, negativity, and distortions. We cannot find our light without looking at our darkness. This is a journey your soul chose to take in the spirit world long before you were born. It chose you for its earthly partner on this journey, and it had all the best hopes and intentions for a successful mission. It knew and still knows that here in this physical form is the only place this journey can be taken. But before we get into that any further, I'd like you all to look at this board in silence for a minute or so and see which of these phrases resonates with you the most. Don't think about it too much. Just let it fall on you. A period of silence for about 1 minute. Paul, I think we should have what we call a go-around. I'd like each of you to tell us a little bit about yourself and your spiritual journey up until now, and then tell us which of the phrases you resonate with the most. I realize this will not be easy. It will take some courage to admit that any of those phrases are speaking to you. There is a talking stone on the altar. If you hold it while you speak, it will help bring you clarity. Anyone can start. A period of time and silence passes, and Amy finally reaches for the stone. My name is Amy. I'm 29 years old. I really haven't had much of a spiritual journey. At least I've never really paid much attention to the deeper meaning of my existence, or my mission, as you would call it. I've just always felt that life was about trying to get happy, or be happy, or find happiness. I wasn't really raised in a religious manner. My father was raised Presbyterian, but we never went to church that much, only on Christmas and Easter. My parents were not really the religious type, but my grandparents would come to visit us on those holidays. They were churchgoers, my father's parents. I guess my dad felt like he needed to appease them, so they would dress me and my sister up and drag us and my grandparents off to church to make a decent show of it. Church scared me, and the whole experience felt awkward. I mean, even as a small child, I could tell there was a lot of acting and tension going on in my family around these church-going events. I actually sort of dreaded these holidays. I hated how phony our family felt in that church, like we didn't belong there. Holidays were supposed to be happy times, and I dreaded them. Amy begins to cry a little. I mean, can a kid just have a happy holiday? That's what we did. The phony church family showing up at Christmas and Easter year after year, right through grade school and all my teenage years, and even until I moved away from home. I don't know why I played along, but I did. As much as it bothered me, I never spoke up about it. I was what you might call a melancholy and quiet child. I don't know why. Fuck, I'm still melancholy, but with a little more of a sense of humor, I guess. The group chuckles with a sense of support and understanding. Amy, I hate to admit it, but I relate to more than one of those phrases on that board. But I think I am unworthy is ringing my bell the loudest. Sarah, what do you think you are unworthy of? Amy, happiness and love. Sarah, whose love? Amy, everyone's love. God's love. How could anyone love a phony like me? How could God love a phony like me? A moment of silence. Shit, I can't believe I just said that. Amy, looking agitated, starts to fidget. Sarah, what are you feeling right now, Amy? Amy, angry, really angry. Sarah, at your parents? Yes. Sarah, for making you feel like a phony? Yes. Jesus, I feel like I'm 15 years old right now. I want to tell them I'm not going to church anymore. Do you want to tell them now? Yes. So this is where a work scene begins. Paul, Amy, Sarah and I are going to play your parents, and you're going to tell us how you really feel about this whole church thing. 15-year-old Amy is going to have her say. Kate, do you think you can play Amy's sister for a moment? Amy, what is your sister's name? Kim, her name is Kim. Paul, is she older or younger? Amy, younger, 3 years younger. Paul, Kate, are you willing to play Kim? If so, stand next to your sister. Kate nods and jumps into the scene. All four of them stand up. Paul and Sarah, as Amy's parents, start acting like they are in a hurry to get Amy and Kim in the car and get going to church. Paul, Amy, what do you call your grandparents? Amy, did call them. They are both dead. We call them Granny and Gramps. Paul, okay, here we go. Come on, girls. Granny and Gramps are already in the car. You know they will get angry if we're late for church. Amy hesitates for a moment, but gets the gist and jumps in. I'm not going. Paul, what do you mean you're not going? Amy, just that. I'm not fucking going to church with you guys anymore. I'm sick of playing the hypocrite. I've had enough of this little charade we play every Christmas and Easter just to appease Granny and Gramps. Why can't they just go off to church on their own? They know where it is. They know how to get there. They know we never go to church except when they come to visit. We're not church people. Jesus, we are all such hypocrites. We're phonies, and everyone in that church knows it. You guys can go, but I'm not fucking going anymore. Amy screams, I can't be a phony anymore. She's screaming. All right, I'm not going to scream. She screams it several more times and then falls to the floor, sobbing uncontrollably. The anger turns to grief. All those repeated episodes of playing the sweet little church girl twice a year have finally taken its toll on her. She is paralyzed with the grief of never being able to make her own choice. Paul, for God's sake, Amy, what the hell has gotten into you? Amy's mother, Sarah, comes to her defense. She kneels down next to her daughter, raises her hand back to her husband. She's right. We are not church people. We only do this to please your parents. This little lie we keep playing out is taking its toll on her. Why don't you go to church with your parents? I'll stay home with the girls. The three of us need to have a talk. Amy continues to sob, and Sarah gets closer to her on the floor, holding her in her arms. They are not acting now. Amy's sister, played by Kate, gets down on the floor and joins them. She starts to softly rub Amy's back. Kate is crying too, but not as Amy's sister. By now, Kate is generally moved to tears and Amy's release of emotions. 3 Kleenex boxes are on the floor. Matthew reaches for a tissue and wipes some tears out of his eyes. Amy is still crying, but begins to gather her composure. She reaches for a tissue too, starts to dry her eyes, but then sobs again, just as loud. Everyone is a bit stunned and emoted by what they are witnessing. Amy finally slowly stops crying, but looks emotionally spent. A period of silence has gone by. Dan, not patronized. Wow, Amy, that was intense, and possibly the bravest thing I've ever witnessed. Another period of silence. Paul, well, everyone, that's what real courage looks like. Amy, would you like a group hug? Amy shyly and quietly says yes. Amy and Paul and Kate stand up and everyone gathers together for a standing group hug with Amy in the center, which lasts about 30 seconds. Natalie reaches for a tissue and begins to dry her eyes. They move back to their seats, tissues in hand. They sit quietly for a few moments and then Natalie says, "What the fuck just happened here? I feel sad and happy for her at the same time. And by the way, Sarah, that was really sweet the way her mom stood up for her and protected her in that scene. My mom never would have done that." Amy, that really did feel good. I wonder if she really would have done that for me. I mean, I guess I never really gave her the chance. I was such a difficult kid, so distant and aloof. Sarah, don't beat yourself up, Amy. You were hurting inside and afraid to speak up. Amy, I really was scared to speak up. I really was. Short period of silence. Matthew, so what really did just happen here? Paul, every holiday trip to church was a traumatic event for Amy. Maybe some were less traumatizing as time went on, but they took their toll on her. She had reached her boiling point a long time ago, but she never let her true feelings show back then. She never spoke up. She believed she could not speak up. But more importantly, the result was that an image was formed in her psyche. Amy, the image that I am unworthy of love because I'm a phony holiday church-going hypocrite living in a hypocrite family. Paul, that's a bit harsh, but exactly. Amy, I'm still carrying that image that I am unworthy of love for being a phony. Until just now, you were carrying that image only in your subconscious, and it was standing in the way of your happiness. You would always put a mask over it. You'd never let the world know that you really felt that way about yourself, but you did just now, and that image can no longer hide in your subconscious. It is now exposed in your conscious mind and in your conscious mind. You now know where it came from and when it started. It will no longer have so much power over you. Amy, that's not making it any less painful. I feel like I just extracted my own tooth without Novocaine. Everyone laughs. I hear you, Amy. It's going to be painful for you for a while, maybe even more painful than your loneliness, but only for a while. Trust me, that image is already beginning to dissolve. Dan is right. You reached into your divine courage and laid yourself bare for us to see. That took an enormous amount of strength and trust. Amy, whew, I feel unsteady inside, like my mainsail is broken. Paul, that false image was your mainsail, and you just broke the mast that held it. Everything you consciously hoped for had to find its way through and around that subconscious image. Most of it never made it. Your fulfillment was blocked by that image. Amy, Jesus, Paul, Amy, you're going to have to be kind to yourself now, very kind. This is where the going really gets tough. You better give me some pointers on how to be kind to myself, because right now I'm feeling ashamed and angry with myself for letting that image have its way with me all these years. Paul, the first thing you must know is that the image is false. You are not a phony. You are not a hypocrite. You are not unworthy of love. You are worthy of everyone's love. You are worthy of God's love. You are worthy of it all. Look at the faces in this room. Do they look like they want to chastise you? She looks at everyone's face. No. Paul, the image is the manifestation of your distorted thoughts about the trauma you experienced over and over again. As a child, you did not know any better. You could not possibly know you were even forming a false image. Amy, I guess not. Paul, most children only need to be traumatized once to form an image. I know it doesn't feel like it right now, but what happened here just now was truly a moment of grace. I don't want to get too deep into an explanation right now, but you just woke up to your soul's mission. Natalie, girl, that was some serious juice. I want some of what you're drinking right now. You are my fucking hero. The group laughs and Amy laughs too. She begins to lighten up a bit. She looks back at Paul. You still need to tell me how to be kind to myself. Paul, Amy, inside you is a wounded child. Every single human on this earth has or has had one of those destructive images. Everyone has a wounded child. You are not alone. Your wounded child is very vulnerable right now. Her mask is off and she's going to need a lot of support until her emotional legs get strong again. That little girl needs some reparenting. That little girl needs to be cared for and supported the way Sarah just did in your work scene. Amy, that did feel really good, but Sarah is not my mother. I can't go home with her. Paul, this is going to sound like an abstract concept to you, but adult Amy can be the parent of wounded child Amy. You have all the love, wisdom, and compassion it takes to take care of and heal your inner wounded child. In fact, it has to be this way because ultimately on this journey, you heal and transform yourself. No one else can heal you. We can all support you, but no one else can dissolve your image. Amy, ouch. Paul, you would not harshly judge it or chastise a child who has not lived through a lesson yet, would you? Amy, no, I would never do that. Paul, then be kind to your own inner child who is now learning this lesson from your adult self for the first time. You will continue to get triggered into your image. This is for certain. But now adult Amy will see exactly what is happening. She will not let your wounded child go down the rabbit hole of subconscious emotional distortion. After a period of time and self-examination, that conscious muscle will become very strong and adept. After another period of time, the image will be dissolved and all you want from life will feel within your grasp. Amy, are you sure? Paul, I am certain, but the work has just begun and there will be setbacks. If you choose to take the journey, Sarah and I will be here to help you learn how to take the steps. We will be your guides and show you how to care for your wounded child, but you'll see, you'll get the hang of it. And in no time at all, you won't need us anymore. Kate, we'll help you too, Amy. We'll help support you, won't we, guys? Everyone, hell yes. We are a team. Amy starts crying again. Paul, I'm guessing those are tears of joy. Amy, they are. I need another group hug. They all hug and then take a bathroom break. So that's sort of what the real life lecture 39 looks like.
That's great. Anybody have questions or comments on? Did it help you get an understanding of an image? If you want to go ahead and stop your share, Franco, go back to the.
Okay. I do that at the bottom.
Yeah.
Okay. Oops. Wait a minute. How do I do that? Well, let's see.
Say at the bottom somehow stop
Close
share.
that. Oh, there we go.
Yeah.
Did I do
Frank,
it?
I just wanted to say that that was really awesome. it's I like that there's no fluff there. That's really how it goes, right? This is a very real group setting, and that's awesome that you were able to intuit that, or use some of your own life experiences to depict that so well and so raw. That's great, man.
Thank you, Jake.
Is Jasmine still with us? There you are.
I'm still here.
Does that help you get an idea of images at all? A little more?
A little bit, yeah. I mean, thanks for that, Frank. It does. But I just had a thought when she, dissolved that image. This is just how my mind works. I'm like, Jesus, I have so many images. So this is gonna be a lot of work. But yeah, that was beautiful. Thanks for sharing.
Great, thanks, Jasmine. And it's true. I mean, we have more than one image, but it kind of boils down into a main image, and it's work to bring them out. And it's a lifetime work, but every piece of it that we do, the easier it gets, right? The more light there is, the more, especially as we do that healing of our own self-judgment, and challenge that inner image of self-worth. That's the guide spends a lot of time and a lot of other lectures on that part of our survival mechanism, and it really is kind of the beginning of another level of the work when we can unify within ourselves, right? And be, like Frank is saying, our own inner guide and loving parent to our own inner child, right? As long as we're still in a kind of where we're frustrated with ourselves and judging ourselves from that idealized self-image, it's harder, and the work is a little more of a slog and takes a little longer. But as we work with that, we do pick up and learn how to get present for ourselves and recognize, what's needed. And like in Frank's, example, oftentimes in group work, we sort of do family, reconstellation, like what happened then caused the wounds. So in the group, a lot of times we can feel like somebody else can offer what was missed back then, what was truly needed when we're in these deep places of regression and, feeling, and having another human being also, offer, and receive. But it's also, like you said, ultimately we have to give it to ourselves, right? And it's great when other people can give it, and that heals as well. But it's something that, if we depend on others for, then we can get lost again. Anybody else? So we got a minute or two more. Let's take a look. I found some of these question answers going into some other areas, but I sort of enjoyed what, was being brought up. So question, I find it hard to understand meditation and prayer in depth. If you have approached a problem already, how can you approach it on a deeper level? Answer, reaching the same old problem on a deeper level happens organically as you continue to work. But once you have uncovered a new approach to a problem, you have to think, meditate, and pray with the new findings all over again. And then you have to think about it. Pray to assimilate the new material properly. Pray that you'll be able to integrate it with your personality so that you'll become well-rounded. A new finding usually does not fit into the mental picture you have of yourself. It calls attention to yourself. To make the distorted emotions whole and healthy, one has to work on one's findings in the way that I've explained in this lecture. So question, you wanted to talk tonight about the problem of desire versus renunciation. So this is a kind of a different topic. No, maybe. I think it's actually and often is connected with, you know, these lectures to some of the Q&As, but I think I'm going to jump down to this one, which is just about the problem of selfishness in prayer, because I think this connects more with our inner self images and our, a lot of what we're working with is, our violation of spiritual law and stuff. And so, the right and wrong selfishness, the guide even has a lecture of that name, is important, and to understand and sort of, sometimes we do get confused about, is it, like selfish to ask, or, like, is it like a, is there really a God out there that's going to respond, Buddhists more, like it's all within, that kind of thing. So I think this is a useful question. So he says, I know that many people are afraid that their prayers are selfish, but that depends very much on how you pray. You cannot say of any act that it is selfish or not without examining it. Aside from crass instances, it is your motive that counts in all desires and attitudes. Selfishness always depends on the how. To determine this is really very simple. If you pray for things solely because you want them and because it would be pleasant to have them, and for no other reason, then of course it is a selfish prayer and will do no good at all. For only a pure spiritual force coming out of your soul will have an effect. A selfish prayer indicates a misunderstanding of life and is therefore made in untruth, even though you are not deliberately dishonest. Nevertheless, an untrue thought, innocent and in good faith as it may be, cannot meet with the true forces of the cosmos. Like attracts like, and this law cannot be changed. One of the first things you learn on this path is to ask yourself about your motives for desiring a certain thing, to ask yourself about the why of some of your emotional reactions. If you do not find the answer, it is a good beginning to pray for the will to recognize yourself fearlessly and truthfully. Thus, in such an instant, you would pray that your motives should become purified. This cannot be construed as selfishness. Furthermore, it is certainly not selfish to pray for the good of other creatures. If you can bring yourself to pray for those who have harmed you and mean it, that in itself is an act of purification. And if you can pray for strength and understanding to overcome your cowardice, to face yourself, to overcome your resistance to developing yourself, there is nothing selfish in that. If you believe that wanting the happiness that inevitably results from purification after a certain point is reached is self-serving, then remaining unpurified and unhappy would seem to be a higher aim because it would seem selfless. In this connection, you must understand how God's laws work. Only those who are happy can bring happiness to others. I do not mean cheap and easily obtainable happiness, but the real thing that comes only by hard labor and that no one can take away from you. You will never see an unhappy person who can truly bring happiness to others. That is impossible. An unhappy person may do a good deed, a single unselfish act, but cannot possibly make another person happy. Therefore, your purifications and development should be the main intent of your prayer, apart from praying for others and considering the resulting happiness as a byproduct, a means to an end rather than the end itself. So, there's a way in which when, we were talking about this a little bit earlier about, how an unhappy person, and it's like, I think basically he's saying, the people that do this work have a certain level of grounded, happiness, even though they may not be completely happy in life. It's like there's a certain self-responsibility and there's a certain, higher self capacity that makes you, someone who, is, truly, able to, be in relationship healthily with another person, right? And so I think here he's talking about an unhappy person who's always complaining and needing the other person to fix them or make them happy and that kind of thing, right? So, and also, just like carrying a cloud around you or whatever, you're not going to lift up somebody else, but, it's like, if that other person also is, not dependent on you, they can hold their own space. And if you're self-responsible, that's really all that's needed. So, and then it says, even if the selfish motive is not as pure as expecting, even if the unselfish motive is not as pure as expecting, if unselfishness, namely the desire to become happy, enters your motivation a little bit at the beginning of your upward climb, recognize this, but do not mind it too much. Accept yourself as you are. This is very important, right? We just really need to ground in accepting ourselves as we are, with humility for our imperfections, and strength and courage, and knowing, like deep within, we also are the light, we are 50-50. And so, we don't want to identify with the worst of us, nor are we, yet gods, but, we have within us that possibility. So accept yourself as you are, as still imperfect. I think there was a shift in this. So even if selfish motive is not as pure as expecting happiness, I don't know, maybe not. I see that these sentences didn't work really well. So happiness only as a byproduct is still a step forward in the realization of truth. Only by purifying yourself can you become happy. The person who has a lower degree of consciousness, however, believes that happiness results from giving in to all the desires coming from the lower nature. If you are not free from selfishness, and scarcely a human being is, it is certainly healthier to see this clearly instead of forcing it away, judging yourself for it. In that way, it will only hide in your soul and cause you more harm than the clear and courageous recognition of its existence. Know that the aim is a higher one, and know that you are emotionally not there yet. Also realize that secluded happiness is impossible. The separating wall must crumble, and that is what all of you are afraid of. It threatens you. We think we're protected behind the separating wall, but it's really the source of our suffering and our aloneness and our misery. So we don't realize that by keeping your separating wall, you defeat your own purpose and you contradict your desire to develop, which exists just as strongly as your fear of it. You all desire happiness and you all desire to give happiness, yet you cannot achieve either one without losing your separateness. And how do you lose your separateness? By doing the very thing that seems hardest to you. Perhaps it is giving up your pride, going through your apparent shame. When you approach the problem this way, you will realize that this kind of prayer, there is certainly nothing selfish. And again, this brings me back to, the guide saying that, the greatest gift we can give each other is to show up in our imperfect self, right? And not to hold ourselves back in pride and separateness, right? And this allows other people to also, accept their own self and be real in relationship. So when you approach the problem this way, you will realize that there is a kind of prayer, that in this kind of prayer, there's certainly nothing selfish. For God wants you to be happy. It is a long tradition of misunderstanding, often unpronounced, that to be godly means to be unhappy and severe. To be godly is supposed to be martyrdom. This image is engraved in humanity as a whole. No, my friends, it is not so. So do not feel guilty if you also become happy. But do not pray directly for happiness. Pray for the strength and ability to remove the obstacles you have placed between yourself and happiness. And this means going through the unhappiness, self-inflicted by error and ignorance. The outcome will be the clear light of peace, harmony, beauty, and joy that will be yours regardless of other people's actions. This is the spirit you should have when you pray. And so another question, may I ask why it is so difficult at times to start praying at all? And he says, you all know that your development does not proceed upward or downward along a steady line. It fluctuates, going up and down in spirals. And sometimes while you are on a downward curve, you do not realize you are really a step higher than the last upward curve you were on. Although the last upward curve was, on the whole, lower than the present downward curve, every upward curve feels better, and you feel an elation and a liberation that you do not feel on the downward curve, which you have now worked yourself up to. Right? So are you following this? Whenever you are on a downward curve, you encounter conflicts that you have not yet resolved. So we have to kind of, resolve stuff, and we have a moment of expansion and freedom, and then, there's another layer and another level, and we come to another place where there's still unresolved material, and they disquiet you. They make you restless and fearful until you have laboriously worked them out and understood them, until you have fitted them into as much of the whole picture as is available to you now. And with this is done, the upward curve sets in again, and you enjoy the clear air of a gained truth a little further. But when the downward curve comes again, you must delve into the darkness of your confusion and error, and that cuts you off from the divine stream. And you may oversimplify this by saying, things are depressing. I experience unpleasant things, and that is why I'm cut off from the divine flow. You are only half right, and that is always dangerous. The unpleasantness you are experiencing is only a reflection, a necessary effect of the cause you have within yourself that waits to be dug out. And that is why when you are on the downward curve, which may vary in length according to the personality and the inner problems to be solved, the flow is cut off. You are surrounded again by the strong impressions of the world of manifestation. You no longer connect with the feeling of reality that you have tasted at other times. This disconnection is necessary. It provokes a battle on your part to attain victory again. Every victory means a new upward curve. So in a way, as he was talking about this, it sort of reminds me that, we have these, up and down flows and these contractions and expansions in the journey ongoing, and also in bigger and lesser ways. So, in some sense, the great dark night of the soul can be seen as sort of maybe the last manifestation of this downward spiral and contraction. But, I hear it's a doozy, right? So, we do the work. We have a dark night of the senses, a dark night of the soul, but in each instance, it's taking us, deeper into the freedom that's ultimately possible. And so, we want to receive the beauty and not doubt the times of inspiration and strong connection that we sometimes feel, and just recognize that then the clouds come over us, and doesn't mean that the truth of spirit that we felt before is gone, but we're just in another phase, and we're in this, deepening and delving into these places within us that are still, ruled by the confusion of the images and the darkness that's there and our defenses around them. So let me finish the closing that he has, and we'll see if there's any other. Well, let's open it now. Anything final on this part? Any final comments or? So in closing, he said, it is quite natural that in such periods of temporary darkness, you cannot feel God's absolute truth, that you do not vibrate with it. This cannot be forced by your will. But what you can and should do during these periods is to think clearly and reasonably about your findings in the light of what you now know. So this is, again, if we can't feel the love, if we can't feel the connection, you know, a lot of times we can remember a level of the truth, you know, that we're beginning to comprehend in these deeper ways. And when we remember that, although temporarily the knowledge sits only in our brain, you know, and we can't fully know it inside again, you know, we can trust it still and wait until we become embodied, you know, in it once again. And, you know, at that time, it's a good time to just, you know, explore what is this that's, you know, sitting in me instead of that truth. Because usually it's you know, part of our journey of clearing and doing the purification of these forces inside of us that are still trapped in lower consciousness. So, and then he closes with be blessed, my dear ones. Okay. So thank you, Frank, for sharing your example there from your play. And I think I put out in my, you know, thing for those that are local, you know, come for our community weekend. I'm doing a workshop there at Seven Oaks too. And, you know, hopefully we'll maybe even see if we can get this play somewhat a reading done or something. Frank, I'll be in touch with you about that, or you know, check and see what we can do. If you know of other people that might be interested in coming and, you know, reading for you, that would be great if you could look into that, if you feel up to that.
All right.
Okay, any other final pieces for this evening? Okay, everybody, good evening. Thank you.
Thank you, darling.
Thank you. See everybody next time.
Yeah.
Adios.
We'll continue with the third one on the image series number 40. Okay, see you then.
Thank you, Darlene.